Hello and welcome to the 17th of these liturgical recital films for St John's, Princes Street in Edinburgh. This film is a little different from those that have gone before because it is a little longer, and today I am covering music for two Sundays, Sundays the 12th and 19th of July 2020. And the film began with the three improvisations from the morning service on the 12th of July. These pieces were all improvised on the same original theme, and although they were conceived as completely separate standalone pieces within the service, when I listened back to them afterwards I thought that they worked well as a set of three pieces to form a sort of a triptych, so it seemed to be the right thing to do to put them together and present them in that way. In the second part of the programme, I'm going to take you on a little bit of an historical journey, and I suppose I could call this part of the programme the route to Bach. This is a slightly dangerous thing to say because there are many routes by which one could trace the influences on the music of Johann Sebastian Bach. But in this part of the film I'm going to focus on two composers who were undoubtedly influential not only on Bach himself but on a wide variety of composers working in Germany in Bach's time, just before and just after. We begin with the music of a 17th century composer, born in the 16th century, died in the 17th century, Jan Schwelinck. He was a Dutch composer, organist of the Old Church in Amsterdam. A famous organist in his day, he played as part of his duties in the Old Church in Amsterdam. Every day of the week there was a sermon preached, and Schwelinck played after the sermon and also played at other times during the day to entertain the promenaders in the church, because this was a time in the north of Europe where churches were used very frequently for civic and secular activity. So there were parts of the building that were reserved for prayer and for sacramental services and divine worship, and then there were other parts of the building which were used for business and for pleasure. People walked there, people met their friends there, and the use of the buildings was very much more varied than I think we are used to in our own day and age. So Schwelinck was a renowned organist in his time, a distinguished composer of music and a very influential composer of music, because he is seen, although he is himself Dutch, he is seen as the father of the North German school of organ composition, of which Johann Sebastian Bach is a later and perhaps the greatest member. The piece that I'm going to play for you now is a very, very beautiful piece. It is a set of Schwelinck's most famous organ work. It's a set of variations on the melody Mein junges Leben hat ein End, My young life has an end. This is a song, and it's a rather sad song about a young man whose life is coming to an end and he's lamenting the bad choices that he's made. But in Schwelinck's hands it's turned into a piece of music that isn't at all sad or gloomy. It's very beautiful, very effective, and displays a mastery of counterpoint. Counterpoint in music is when, rather than having a melody with an accompaniment underneath it, as would later be the case, as exemplified by music by composers such as Handel. Counterpoint is where you have multiple voices, all of which have a tune of their own, and they're all proceeding at the same time, and they are moving together and apart, and they're interacting with each other. So you might call counterpoint a more sort of linear or horizontal type of music, where the later melody and accompaniment style is perhaps a more vertical type of harmonic structure. This, of course, would be hugely influential in the music of Johann Sebastian Bach, who was the contrapuntalist par excellence, the greatest contrapuntalist the world has ever seen. So, as you listen to these beautiful flowing lines of Schwelinck's variations on Mein junges Leben hat ein End, it might be interesting for you to just listen to the linear style of the music, so that when later you hear a piece of music by Bach himself, you can see how that idea has been transferred through over several generations into Bach's own music. This is the work by Schwelinck. Following that beautiful set of variations by Jan Schwelinck, I'm now turning to the music of a slightly later composer, Dietrich Buxtehude. Buxtehude was born in Denmark but made his fame and his fortune in the North German city of Lübeck, where he was organist of the Marienkirche. He was extremely famous and extremely influential in his day, and as a matter of fact, the young Johann Sebastian Bach took a leave of absence from one of his church posts, a leave of absence that incidentally ended up being considerably longer than that for which he'd asked permission, so that he could walk a round trip of in excess of 200 miles simply to hear Buxtehude play. It must have been an interesting time for Bach, because not only did he hear Buxtehude play on many occasions, we know that he became personally involved with Buxtehude's daughter. As a matter of fact, there was talk of marriage, and the young Johann Sebastian did what we might almost call a moonlight flit. He seems to have got out of town quite quickly. Obviously something was becoming a little bit beyond his control, and he didn't like that idea, so he hit the road. But this piece that I'm going to play for you now is one of Buxtehude's great organ works. This is the Preludium, Fuga und Chaconne. Now, I said earlier on when I was introducing the Schwelinck piece that Schwelink's duties at the old church in Amsterdam were to play to entertain people walking around the church, the promenaders in the building. It was exactly the same case for Buxtehude at the Marienkirche in Lübeck. Buxtehude would have played for services every day and would also have played at regular intervals during the day for the benefit of those people who were in the building, meeting friends, spending time there, conducting business, whatever. This was an opportunity for cities to show off the wealth and the prosperity of the city by the example of wonderful musical instruments in the churches and the very best retained musicians to play them. So Buxtehude's role was really to promote the organ of the Marienkirche, and in so doing to promote himself. And in his own compositions we hear many examples of compositional styles that will later feed into the music of Johann Sebastian Bach and be greatly there expanded. As you listen to this Preludium, Fuga und Chaconne, there's a couple of things that you might want to listen out for, because you will hear echoes of them in the Bach work that will come next. First of all, this piece begins with a virtuoso solo on the pedals. The German organs of the time were the only organs in the world that were fitted with the type of pedal board that we now recognize as the standard organ pedal board today. So the German school was the only place that you could find writing for the feet of this style, and Buxtehude was famous as an exponent of the pedal board, and in this piece he opens with a pedal solo that will be greatly developed in a piece of Bach that you will hear in due course. You may also want to listen to the way in which this piece is sectional. It is conceived broadly in three sections: a preludium at the beginning, a prelude, and then there is a fugal section which is played on the quieter registrations on the bottom manual of the three on this organ here. And then the chaconne, which comes at the end, which is a lively return to some of the brighter, louder sounds on the organ. So the piece is sectional. The piece also displays counterpoint in the way that it was used in Schwelinck's variations on Mein junges Leben. But what we hear at this point in Buxtehude's music that would find great development in Bach's work is the idea of lively dancing rhythm within that counterpoint. Listen, for example, to the subject of the fugal section. It dances along. It's very simple, recognizable, easily recalled, and it has tremendous energy and lightness in it. So the organ really sparkles in this music. And that idea of light, dancing, lively music is carried forward into the final section of the piece, the chaconne. So this is Dietrich Buxtehude's Preludium, Fuga und Chaconne in C. In this route to Bach film, we have come via the music of Jan Schweling and Dietrich Buxtehude to now the music of Johann Sebastian Bach himself. I'm going to play for you one of his greatest and most significant organ works. This is the Toccata, Adagio and Fugue in C. You will have heard from the Buxtehude piece a style of writing that was known in its time as the Stilus Fantasticus, which literally translates as the fantastic style. And in the opening of his C major toccata that you're about to hear, Johann Sebastian Bach is going to take that style and make it his own. The opening is very dramatic, it's very rhetorical, it's almost like a recitative in an oratorio, it's very free, and very, very virtuosic, displaying both the organ and the organist's technique in equal measure. And then you may recall when I was introducing the Buxtehude piece that I suggested listening out for that pedal solo that came at the very beginning of Buxtehude's Preludium, Fugue und Chaconne. Well, in the middle of Bach's Toccata in C, you will hear and see another pedal solo, this one much more expanded from Buxtehude's version, more dramatic, more virtuosic, more complex. This is a perfect example of Johann Sebastian Bach taking an idea, an example, a model from the music of Buxtehude and then expanding it and infusing it with a magic that was all his own. This piece also, similarly to the Buxtehude, is sectional, and when we get to the middle section, the Adagio, you will hear a style of writing that you may find recalls some of the melodic writing in the Schweling variations. Bach was not a great melodist. I have sometimes got into trouble with audiences or been seen as having said something scandalous with concert audiences when I have asserted that Johann Sebastian Bach was not a great melodist. What I mean by this is that he was not famous for writing melodies, tunes that people left the concert humming in the way that, for example, Handel would become in England with his oratorios, the greatest of which, of course, is Messiah. Bach was perfectly capable of writing a beautiful melody, but his main interest was in writing contrapuntal music and in the interest that arose between the interplay of voices. So rather than having one voice that had a melody that was dominant and sovereign above everything else, underpinned by an accompaniment, Bach was much more interested in having multiple voices that were of equal importance. And as you listen to the final section of the Toccata, Adagio and Fugue in C, you will hear that in the Fugue, which is in 4 voices, and you will hear here in this final section of the piece ideas which come very clearly from Buxtehude's example. I referred previously with the Buxtehude to how lively the fugue subject is in Buxtehude's hands. Well, in Bach's hands here it becomes even livelier, even more deftly handled, even more easily recognized. It's a real earworm of a fugue subject, this. Once you've got it in your head, you can't really get it out. And as is typical of Johann Sebastian Bach's example, his fugue is on a much grander scale than Buxtehude's. It is lengthy, it is virtuosic, it is incredibly well constructed. And this surely is an example of the music that makes Bach the greatest composer that has ever lived. To conclude today's film, I wanted to present to you another of my own improvisations. This piece was improvised before the morning service at St. John's on the 19th of July. It's a little set of variations on a plain song theme. The plain song is O Lux Beata Trinitas, which translates as O Trinity, Most Blessed Light. And when I was working with this theme, I had in mind to create a homage to Jan Schwelink's music. So if you cast your mind back to the variations on Mein Junges Leben, with which the second part of this film began, this is with a little bit of 21st century license taken with some of the harmonic rules. This is my little homage to Schweling. So this is my improvised set of variations on this beautiful plain song theme.